I think your list of books kind of became my list of books.
Yeah.
I use it now as a foundation for my list.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that those books introduced to me that I had never seen before. When I graduated back in the 90s,
Yeah.
there was nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, there was Art Nouveau, Bauhaus,
Yep.
Some art stuff.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't until later that design just started exploding.
Yeah.
Talk about, so these were like really like kind of the highlights of design. You talk about the Vignellis and you talk about the Muller-Brockmans and Emil Ruders and, the list goes on. And all those guys were nobody knew about them. They were like...
They were discarded because they weren't relevant.
Hidden treasures. So bringing all those guys out, like how did you use that as an inspiration for your work? And how did that influence you as a designer today?
Well, I really love modernism, but to me it was a dead visual form. So just because I admire something doesn't mean I want to emulate it. So out of respect for the work, I didn't ever try and copy it, publicly at least. I would take the essence of it, but do it in my own way. And I like things that are wrong and aren't, so I would take that and I would learn how to do abstract grids. And there's actually a book, Bosshard, his last name is Bosshard. I freaked me out because he talks about abstract grids, but I would just do that on my own, experimenting.
Yeah.
But those guys I respected so much, and the work was I had put it up on such a high pedestal that I never wanted to emulate it.
Right. It's interesting. It's almost like there is no right way of doing anything in the world. I mean, it's almost like, for the masters, like their mistakes become their style. And then at some point it gets codified and you think that's the way to do it. But it isn't until you really work hard on finding your own style that you realize that these guys didn't know what they were doing as much as you don't know what you're doing. We're learning.
Yeah, but they did. Right? But they did try to bottle it. They made it was a style and it was a philosophy, and that's why I never wanted to dip into it, because I had seen it had failed, and it was a shell. It was a beautiful shell, but it was still a ghost. See what I did there?
Fantastic.
Very nice.
So what now? Is there something else we need to talk about?
We got some things.
Yeah.
How much time do we have left?
Although you never tried to emulate the grid system as such, you do use grids, albeit somewhat abstractly, in your work, especially when you're laying type against your fine art. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you use grids without making the grid visible?
Well, this was a good example up here. This was a true is true. So all these numbers you could click on, and they would have different animations that would come up. And so basically it's a springboard to do other things on top of, and to see how many, I think you could do like, I don't know how many thousands of different combinations in here, but to try and take it and exploit it, like I said before, I mean, that was my interest, was how to subvert. How to break the grid. Breaking the grid. Yeah.
Stefan?
Oh, me.
Are you curious? You
So
got a
the
nice
grid,
pile over there.
Let's go back. So what I really admire with people that, especially with you, you have a healthy work ethic. You never stop working. And I like seeing that in people that have a lot of talent, that they're not afraid to experiment. It's almost like you channel your inner child in a way. You're not afraid of mistakes. And I think we're in a world where, you get reprimanded if you don't do things the right way, right? Absolutely. And I think that the education system, it teaches you how to do things a certain way.
Yeah.
But what is that certain way? So, and then when students go into the corporate world, you know, you kind of go into that linear business way of thinking, right? Yeah. We have a deadline, we have, you know, we have these resources, and we have a scope, right?
And you know it works.
And all of a sudden you forget about, you know, what is it that we're really doing? And I think that this whole design thinking that is being kind of embedded into corporate culture now it's interesting, because it's almost like everybody is or thinks that they're becoming a designer.
Yeah.
But they don't have the talent, and they forget about the craft.
Well, there's craft and there's communication as well. And design thinking, if you guys don't know, is a new philosophy. It's basically a way to harness creativity of some sort. It's just it's one way to do something, but you can add an extra step to completely, you know, say change everything and make it upside down, you know? And so to me, it's like design thinking is just a way, it's like almost like a tool of working. And I think that in some ways it's, yeah, I mean, if you need a paint by numbers way to do something to get a result, good for you. But to me, it's about experience, and through experience, that's education, and that is developed in the gut. And a good designer will know when something's right or wrong. They may not even be able to explain why, but they'll say, "Do not go this way." I mean, I was working for a company, and I was working on the Seattle's Best logo, and when I got done working on it, I said, "Do not make the drop red," you know, and there's a reason for that. And so what do? They get to the client board, and they like, "We really need it to be red, and coffee is brown, and blood is red," and so things like that, you know, just dumb. I mean, but the thing is that I know that's obvious. That's a total obvious. It should be, but it's obviously not. But that's my thing, is like, you know, you develop this gut, and then you work from that, and no calculation that you come up with can replicate that. And I think that's what we're missing, is that experience and that trust. And I think that's one of the such a frustrating point, is when I'll get hired for a project on a brand, and I'll say, you know, this is where I think we should go, and this is why. And they'll say, no, I think we want to do this. And we'll go back and forth, but finally you have to give in and say, if I'm going to get paid, I've got to do what they want. And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality. But I think experience is really undervalued in the development of the gut. In the West, we don't pride that experience and yeah.
So bringing back the analogy to music, talking about the gut check and understanding what is and what isn't good, applying that to your DJ and record collecting self. How did you, because I'm sure that music influences, you probably listen to music a lot when you work.
All the time.
How does music directly and subconsciously shape the way that you work and your ability to kind of, you know, utilize that gut instinct?
Well, I use music as a tool for sure. Like if I really need to bang something out, I'll use something that's high energy or whatever. But I use it as a way to create a mood. And it's just like restaurants are doing now, and everything is like, if you watch the Mind of a Chef or the Chef's Table or whatever, it's about the full experience. So for me, if I need my desk to be clean, I clean my desk. If my desk can be dirty, it's dirty. It's usually dirty, but I use music as a tool, and but the thing is it's also an escape. It's therapy. It's a hobby. It's an addiction. It's money, because when I record shop, I mean, I know my shit, and I'll go and I'll tear up towns. Me and my friend used to just go around the Midwest, and I'd come back with 2 or 3 crates worth of stuff, and go to Pittsburgh and find those Nathan Davis records, sell them for $100, buy them for $10, and so that I've maintained my whole collection of records. I've probably owned over 30,000 records in my day, and I sell records as well, but it supplies my habit. But it also, accumulating stuff, it accumulates you, it owns you. And so lately I've just been bringing stuff to record shops and putting stuff up on Craigslist and saying $50 for 50 records, come and get them. And
visit Michael on Discogs. Everybody.
Yeah, I'm on Discogs too, and I sell stuff, but I only want to sell the stuff that's like $20 or more that I'm buying for like $1 or $2, But it's fun to find a $300 record for $3, but you have to know your stuff.
Let's see. Another thing I like about your work is you're not afraid to create ugly things, and I'm a big fan of ugly things. I tend to like beautiful things kind of bore me.
Yeah.
So when I see what you're doing, there's this explosive quality to it, and there's a Tom Waits quote that goes, "You have to have a beautiful melody to deliver ugly lyrics." So there's that. Yeah. Dichotomy of ugly and beauty that happens. So it's that constant tension of things.
Yeah, but they go hand in hand.
Right.
I mean, it's a circle and they meet. It's just like a lot of things in life, I mean, your radical conservative viewpoints are almost start to line up with the radical liberal. And so for me, I don't see things like that. I try not to I don't look at things like that. I try not to put things in boxes. And I think that's what's hard for a lot of people is when I've gotten to a point where I do so many things that people don't know how to use me. And it's not a benefit. There's definitely a benefit to have a style until that goes out of style. And then and that's just learning things like that. Like when I was selling books, like as soon as somebody's career is done and they moved on to something else, that book is not worth anything. It goes from $60 to $1. And so for me, I'm about the expression, and so I don't care about style. I don't care about any of that stuff, but I do care about mastering the craft. But I also think, what I also learned in design school is if you put type on a page and you put like, look at me really big, that's one way of doing it. But another way of doing it is putting look at me very small. And to me, that small way and the understatement is way more interesting. That's why I'm drawn to, graphic design from Japan and things like that, is that we don't, we like the loud and the grandiose, and I like more soft. I like being loud too, but I also love the quiet, and I think it's just in looking at nature and life and just in general and being able to see the beauty in everything is such an important thing.
So being able to recognize beauty lets you make ugly things and feel comfortable with them.
There's a lot of ugly things in nature, man. But, like when you watch those sea creatures from from many miles underneath the surface level, there's just some amazing creatures down there.
You referred to your work as grotesque earlier. I think that's a good, because ugly is sort of subjective, but grotesque is grotesque can be kind of beautiful. Like you're talking about these, subaquatic, freakish creatures. They're grotesque, but they're kind of
they're beautiful.
Mesmerizing.
They're beautiful. And to see that and to challenge yourself and say, is this really ugly? Like color combinations. I've always, people will ask like, what's your least favorite color or whatever. And I'm like, man, I don't have one. When you take a color and you pair it with another color, you can make magic and you can pull that off. And I think that's really an important skill. And I would also, like early in my career, I'd use limitations. Like I could only use colors that met 25%. So if I was doing CMYK, I would use 25% cyan or 50% yellow, and just doing things like that, just to give yourself limitations to have fun. But I think also like starting with the color that I find so ugly, and to find another color to make it work. And I think that's fun.
I use the Photoshop invert. Command I, and I find the color palette that I'm like, okay, this is the one that I always use and I'm like comfortable with, and then I do the Command I, and I'm like, wow, what just happened?
Yeah.
And you get some like neon, glowing, ugly colors and now all of a sudden it's kind of shifted the way you think about what you have. Yeah. So like little mistakes that you can kind of employ to kind of help you with, seeing the work from a different perspective, or?
In my process, one of the main tools that I use are mistakes. So I welcome accidents, I invite them, I try and figure out ways to make things go wrong. And that either says, clearly this is not a good thing, or maybe there's something there. And I think that's an interesting part of a process is to, I have actually a project that I started like 16 years ago. It's a series of flashcards that gives commands, almost like the Brian Eno oblique strategies, but you can use it to add an interruption into your process. And I've always wanted to get them printed up. I've just been lazy because I know what it takes to do it right. And if I'm not going to do it right, I don't want to even do it. But I like that kind of thinking. I love like when being challenged, and because there's 1,000 ways to do something, and if something's not going right, either starting over, rethinking what you're doing, or having something that goes wrong in it. I mean, I've been hired on so many projects just to finish it because they can't get it. Something's wrong. They don't know what it is. And I come in there and I'm like, oh, you just got to dovetail this, and it's done. And sure enough, it's done. But it's just having those little, that experience. You can't achieve that without having done this work for that long.
How much of your work do you think is just ends up on the cutting room floor? How much of your work is just crap? You throw it away.
Well, I don't know if I would say it. Well, I throw away a lot of work. As far as painting, I would say like 90% of it, 95% of it.
Do you keep it for a rainy day, or do you throw it away?
I paint over it, often by mistake. I've taken some photos of some past work and thought, shit, that was wrong, to delete that. But yeah, so painting, I'm very quick at. Like, I'll go through a series and I'll paint over them, or I'll add on to it, so I'll collaborate with myself from the past. But design, I mean, with working with clients, the crazy thing is I've done so many album covers now that I have so many rejected pieces, and a lot of the rejected pieces are some of the best. And so what I've been trying to think about is how to redo that. So I've started working with another guy on a way to use that work. But yeah, I mean, I of course I make tons of bad design stuff, and but I don't know about percentage, but easily on the painting is like 95%, I'd say.
It's probably a good number.
Yeah, I mean, I don't throw it, but some I do, but I will paint over it or just file it. You want to do questions? Does anybody have any questions?
I think there's a Q&A. Who is watching time? Who's the timekeeper?
Yeah, we're good with about 9:15. Actually, this is a good time to jump into the Q&A, I think.
I think I'm out of cards, so why don't we?
If folks have questions, you can either, voice them or come to the front and get on the mic if you're more comfortable. But
So where do you find design inspiration these days?
Just by working. He asked where I find design inspiration. I think through working and just making, like I said, just mistakes and whatever. I go back and forth between looking at other people's work, and then like as soon as I feel like too comfortable looking at work, I stop and I just will not look at work for months. And so I think reading is something that I really, whenever I read, I get inspired so much. And that's something that is really hard in this period in my life, is with kids and everything, putting kids to bed at 9, and then I'm just spent at that time. So so that's been hard. But reading is such a joy and it brings out so much inspiration.
What do you read?
I've been trying to read fiction, but then this is what happens is then I'll read like the autobiography of Donald Fagen or Miles Davis or Coltrane or whatever. I read some design stuff. I've been reading the Octavo magazines lately by.
Do you read theory?
I don't. This is something that hasn't come out, but I'm not an academic. I think academics, there's a place for it, and I value it. I just have, whenever I read academic work on, I think art has definite great writing. I mean, I've been watching some documentaries about art, and some of the art stuff, they just hit right. They just get so right. But when people write about design, for some reason, I'm always like, fuck you. like they try and explain something that they try and make it into something that more than it is. And it just rubs me the wrong way, and I don't know why. There's some people that write about design, like the Emigre magazine, when they really were hitting it, that was fun. Yeah. That was interesting. But then there was also the people that use the big words and try and, when you read something and you can't understand it, I always feel like they don't know what they're talking about.
There's a word for that, and it's an academic word. It's bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if you can't talk about something in a way that everybody can understand, you don't know what's going on.
True. More questions?
Anybody?
Tom?
How did you get linked up with Ghostly in the first place?
I was just a fan of the label, and back then, music packaging was just not. It was a bad state for music packaging, and I was just such a fan. I was like Dabry, and they were putting out stuff by Lego Welt and all these great people, and I just was a fan. They actually wrote to me. They said that they were going on a Midwest kind of tour, and they want to stop by my studio and say hey, and they never ended up being able to make it to Minneapolis. But I just kept on writing back and forth, and I knew Sam for about 6 years before he was stranded at the airport, and he gave me a call and said, I'm in Minneapolis, I'd like to hang out. I took him out to dinner, and about a year later, or 2 years later, Tad Mullenix, which was Dabry, needed something that was more physical, because design was flat and lifeless at the time, and he wanted something that had more emotion and more depth. So they called me up, and I was like, hell yes. And so that was late 97, and it came out 2007, and it came out in 2008. Yeah. But then it just came from there. I just kicked ass, and really just I was like, I'm doing this I'm giving it 110%. And they had me do 3 more covers after that. But I think it's also about being. I work very quickly. I make decisions very quick. So when you're talking about the output, that's something that I didn't mention. Is making decisions is really important for me, and to know this is wrong, this is right, and to know how you work, and to know like this isn't going right. I read this fact that they said that the people who play poker, they've put stuff on their hands, and they say their hands start sweating 10 seconds before they know they're about to lose or they're making the wrong decision. So if you can listen to your gut and listen to your, just kind of know yourself and know your process, and this kind of sounds like hippie stuff, but it's real. You can make decisions really quick and go, but I was always punctual and I got shit done. And I think that that's how I got in. It's because there's so many designers that are, I mean, I love it when people come to me and go, it's a tight deadline, I don't know if you can meet it. And I say, if you ever wait on me, you will be the first person. And they're like, shut up. And one person said, oh, that sounds cocky or something like that. And I was like, it's true. You know?
This typeface behind, I saw you do this one in about 2 nights, so
yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
I just drew a typeface in one day.
It's great. Tom, you had a question back there?
Yeah, I do. So in the mid-'90s, the web represented something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel about things like augmented reality, virtual reality? Are those different, new? Are they boring?
Oh. It requires everything. Yeah, I love what's going on. I love that time is being broken down. I love that narrative is nonlinear. I love seeing just shit just getting blown up. I mean,
there's a theme emerging here. Shit's getting blown up.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I don't mean it's very juvenile sounding. I don't mean it like that. But I love those points where nobody knows what they're doing, and I think we're in a great time. But it's also, this stuff has a lot more ramifications to it. When you can play video games in your house and you're in the world, like I just played the new Zelda on Switch because my son got it, and I was like, oh, what you doing over there? And I started seeing, I said, this is amazing. But as soon as I think about it in a virtual reality world, I'm gone. I'm in that world for the next 100 hours or more.
So how much of what you have in your archive can be repurposed and adopted as opposed to brand new things?
Well, I don't try and repurpose things, but I am trying to figure out how to make that stuff work. But I think, I don't know if that is going back to the virtual reality question or whatever. So design a lot of times is not able to be repurposed. That's unfortunate. And I don't like showing concept work a lot. So that sucks. That really sucks. And also when you work with a team, I don't like showing, because I work with a team on a lot of the branding. So a lot of the branding, if it says with another agency, I try and credit that because I'm not the only person. Like when I did the Turner logo, I was on a team, but I finished that boy off, you know? So I did that work, but it's in 3 other designers' portfolios, but it's not in mine. And it kind of sucks, you know? So I'm trying to figure out how to deal with some of that right now. I'm thinking about just showing it and just being like, whatever, but I also want to give credit too. So I think that in design, it's kind of, you kind of going on a tangent, but I think it's tough. But I think the virtual reality is very exciting. I'm very interested in augmented reality. I thought it does not interest me, but virtual, absolutely, 100%. I've been working with a company called Scatter. And they did, I think it's up here. It was the 0 Days documentary about Stuxnet virus, and I did some of the visual stuff for that. So I am very interested, but I feel like the curve is a lot higher, and I'm jumping into it a little bit, but it's when you're younger, you don't have all this other, I have a lot of backlog, and the older you get, it's harder to adopt. Yeah. but I love it.
Makes sense?
Kind of a related question. I was about the same time you were sort of experimenting. I was in the sort of net art community.
Yeah, rise on.
And like, you know, that was all about like pushing. Again, it was blind leading blind and pushing the sort of limits of the medium.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I get that sense of with virtual reality. That's a sort of new edge. But you know, I always felt like once the modem speeds got up to where you actually like didn't have to worry about load times anymore, that you lost a little bit. So I was wondering, like, in that world, like, what do you do to create limits to work against?
That's a good question. I mean, you kind of have to self-sabotage, and you have to figure out incorporate it into your process, ways of disruption. You know, when I'm working on, let's just say, a brand, I always try and think of how could this be, you know, can a line go in front of it? Can it block out the most important part? Can it do things like that? So just keeping that curiosity and that interest alive. I think a lot of times you kind of get jaded and go, I've done that or whatever. But I think there's a lot of things that is still fresh and new, but it is harder. And the more you know, the harder it is to not want to redo things. So I know what you're talking about. It is. It gets challenging. And I like to have illusion. Like you think that something is 2D and it's not, or something that's a photograph. You go, oh, that's a beautiful photograph. How did you get the texture? Oh, it's not a photograph, you know? Like things like that. So, but it gets harder and harder to develop that. And when you spend all this time developing something out for, let's say, a $3,000 project, at a certain point, you gotta feed your family. So a lot of things start working against each other. Yeah, so it is very difficult, and it's a balancing act. It really is.
You had a question?
Yeah.
You were talking about projects that you had in your archive. I'd love to hear you talk about WFTP networks.
Yeah. Yep. So is that just a statement?
Oh, it's more of a question, I guess. Could you talk about it, sir?
Well, yeah. So we're talking about like the uploading, yeah. So, yeah, we were talking about that a little bit ago. Like you had to. So back then, if you had a website, you had to know how to maintain a server almost and everything. So you had to upload everything as well. You didn't have an upload button. You had to learn how to use FTP software and things like that, and you had to learn how to run all that stuff. So there was a lot more to it. It's somewhat easier today, but I don't know. I love that memory, but I don't like the reality anymore. If I have to manage a server, it's really painful because I've got other things. Like I get sponsored by Media Temple, and whenever I have an issue and I tell them I'm a designer, they go, what? And I'm like, because I maintain a dedicated server, and they're always impressed, but I'm having a hard time when an email goes wrong. Email is the bane of my existence. Managing a email is really hard for me because certificates and all that shit expire, and I know that's what everybody wants to talk about, but yeah. It's fun. I miss those days, but kind of not.
What are you working on now? What's coming up next?
Well, the Matthew Deere project I got sucked into really hard, and man, you know, I wanted to do a cable access program with him. So I really, really wanted to do a live production where we filmed him and he interviewed himself, and it was like a call-in show, and he's the caller in, and then we have like all this crazy shit happen that he doesn't know about, and so like kind of make this crazy thing. But what I'm interested in is I'm really, when I say I'm not interested in design as much, I really get interested in design, but I'm interested in communication and the realness of design now, humor and touching people again. Like I'm really trying to figure out how to do that as well. I've been thinking about like redoing my website and showing a lot of the branding work and the custom typefaces, so I can show people like, yeah, that's what I really do. So it's not just word of mouth. So the work can be more consistent, because what's happening is a lot of these bigger agencies that hire me for these projects are crumbling. So it's harder to get that work these days. So I'm talking with a lot of friends and trying to figure out a lot of next steps, but I'm very proactive on that. You know, I always want to be like challenging myself and figuring out what I'm doing. But I've been painting again lately. I'm going to be doing more realistic work. It's going to be abstract as well, but maybe more figurative, and combining shit. You know, like, yeah, anyway, so, yeah.
What's causing the agencies to crumble?
A lot of different things. I think the process has gotten weird. The design process is kind of, it almost eats itself to some degree. Like when I work on a lot of the cable, they want something that looks like other things rather than standing out. And so consistency is desired, and it takes all the fun and the creativity. Like I can guarantee you they're going to want a geometric sans. Well, there's a reason for that too, because it's got to be easily read as well. So I understand that, but you can make a serif read, and you can make a script read. It's harder, but so there's that. And I think there's just so many things. There's so many things. I think getting good talent is a tough thing, and for designers to want to be engaged in a big agency. The big agencies, like when I would go around to agencies, and when I was first trying to get a job, they'd go, we have a ping pong table, we got video games, we got a couch, and I knew what all that meant. We get food every night for you. I'm like, no. I don't want that. I want that at my house. That's at my house. That shit goes to, you pay me, so I get to do that on my free time. And so I could see through some of that stuff real quick. And I had friends that were working for these companies that when a design director steals your work and claims it for themselves, it really hurts people. And seeing my friends go through that stuff, that was something that just made me think, you know what? If I can make it on my own, I'm gonna try that. And I'm kind of an anomaly. Like I don't know anybody that was doing stuff back when I was doing it that's my age that's doing it solo. I don't know anybody that's been doing it like I've been doing it.
The last Mohican.
So I mean, but it is tough. It is getting to where you need teams and things like that. So I think everything's changing. And it's sad because I like agencies. I think there's some great agencies out there that really do it right, but there's a lot of agencies that do it wrong. And if you're not interesting people, then they're gone.
Sorry, not to interrupt.
Yeah.
I think we should do one more question, and then Michael is going to generously sign some posters, which will be complimentary if you're interested, after which we will be DJing, if you'd like to hang around next door. So let's do one more question.
Do you think we architect our own limitations?
The what is the limitations?
Do you think we architect our own
Yeah.
limitations?
Absolutely. You're completely right. We self-sabotage. We think that we're doing the right things all the time, and we screw things up all the time. And I think that's one thing that's why you have to be humble about stuff, is that you have to be humble to think that you're wrong about something. You have to have that humility, and humility is something that you don't see too often these days. And I think it's a really important trait to know you could be wrong. And I think that it's vital. It is.
Every day I'm wrong.
I worked at a nonprofit, and someone screwed up a big job, and nobody would admit to it. And I admitted to it. I said I did it, and I didn't, and because they ended the witch hunt. The witch hunt was done. I said sorry. I fucked it up.
You're a masochist, Mike.
The thing is that I was tired. 2 days of them trying to figure out where it went wrong, and then finally the boss is like, "You didn't do that." Find out the next day, why did you admit to it? I'm like, I was tired of hearing about it. You know what I mean? It ends it. But, that's a huge topic. It's a huge topic. And there's so many gurus out there. That's what makes me so mad, is that there's a lot of young designers out there that talk like they know everything, and they've been designing for 5 years. And I'm like, holy shit. You've definitely figured some things out, without a doubt, but you need to shut the
famous last words. Well, I really appreciate you coming down to Atlanta, Mike.
Yeah, let's hear it from Mike.
It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also brought my Visco book of a lot of the ghostly stuff, so if anybody wants that as well, I've got 6 copies. So.
Right. All right. Thank you guys so much.